Okay, hello again, everyone. My name is Mike Tierney, and I'm going to be talking to you for the next 30 minutes or so about user behavior analytics. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day, which I imagine is a very busy one, to be here with us. And I'm looking forward to discussing the benefits that user behavior analytics offers, and a little bit about the specific approach that we've taken here at SpectorSoft in this area and how it complements and works with our user activity monitoring or employee monitoring offering that I think many of you on the phone are more familiar with. And on that note, first, for anyone that is not overly familiar with us, let me take a brief moment to introduce SpectorSoft. So we've been around for some time. It's a well-established company backed by very respected private equity firms. And we have offerings in two markets or two spaces: user activity monitoring, it's also referred to as employee monitoring, and user behavior analytics, which is a newer space that's just emerging. And I think you'll actually start seeing references to it as user and entity behavior analytics coming out of like the analyst firms like Gartner in the very near future. Our data collector is deployed in thousands of organizations, corporate, government, and nonprofit around the world, and it sits on millions of endpoints. We place our data collector on endpoints and on servers to be as close to the user as possible, because after all, that's the common denominator in the two spaces that we operate in. So why do we do that? We do it first because the endpoint is where the user conducts the majority of their activity and where they do the most accessing of IT resources from. We did some surveying on this. Actually, it was a survey that was we were a sponsor on. Some of our competition were sponsors as well. And it showed that 56% of respondents said the endpoint was the IT asset that an insider attack was most likely to originate from. And that was significantly higher than the next choices, which were the network or a mobile device. The second reason that we place on the endpoint is because the closer you get to the user, the more complete and accurate your understanding of their activities and their behaviors is going to be. I'm going to take an excerpt from something written by Dr. Eric Kolb from the SANS Institute. He wrote that SIM tools are only as good as the data that you provide them. They must receive data on user activity to be effective against insider threats. And the closer you can get to the actual user and point of action, the more effective your analysis will be. So that's the reason why we sit on the endpoint. And again, we play in these two spaces. User activity monitoring or employee monitoring is about collecting detailed, context-rich, data on user activity and logging it. It's just another type of log that can exist within an organization. And it allows for the review, the inspection of activity data, for reporting on it, and for alerts to be generated from it. And we see this most commonly used in incident response scenarios, for investigations, when conducting postmortems, and for actively keeping an eye on individuals, on insiders, employees, or contractors that have been deemed to be higher risk. And I'm going to keep our discussions today on a security focused level. We offer benefits in some other areas as well, but everything we're going to talk about today will be about security. User behavior analytics is a little bit more focused. So what user behavior analytics is, for folks that aren't familiar with it, is all about detecting insider threats, targeted attacks, financial fraud, things that originate from inside the organization. And it does this by focusing on human behavior patterns. So the first task for a user behavior analytics solution is to gain an understanding of what normal behavior patterns look like within an organization. How do the users interact with the resources that they've been given? And establish that over a period of time. And what that enables then is for solutions to look for deviations from normal, for anomalies, and flag them, alert on them, if they suggest or indicate a potential threat. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is some of the benefits that you can realize from user behavior analytics. So we talked a little bit about it. What user behavior analytics is all about making you more secure. It starts with an understanding that all threats are not external, right? There are threats that exist inside an organization. And if you aren't seeing them, it may be that you're not looking. And if you're not looking, you really just don't know if you have threats going on within the organization or not. One of the cautions that I would give to people, and it's things that as I've talked to experts in the industry, is to not be lulled into a false sense of security because you haven't detected an insider threat, unless you have focused efforts on insider threat detection. Otherwise, as Donald Rumsfeld put it, many years ago, you're probably dealing with unknown unknowns, and that's a scary place to be. So we've done different surveys, and we've done some in conjunction with the SANS Institute, it's a very respected organization. So I wanted to share a couple of quick statistics with you that on the topic of insider threats and insider threat detection. First, the average time to detect an insider threat, and this was a survey, we had about 770 respondents across a range of industries. The average time to detect an insider threat was 32 days. Some verticals did a much better job. My recollection off the top of my head was that the energy industry was the shining star in that space and at a significantly shorter period of time. So if there's any folks on the phone with us today from that vertical, congratulations. And then there were some verticals that were significantly slower than that average time. Interestingly, from time to detect, then you have time to respond, and the average time to respond was an additional 17 days. So a very significant lag from the time something was detected to the time response was conducted. And I think there's a number of reasons for that, and we'll talk about some of them a little bit further down the road, but it has to do with having an incident response plan that has special provisions for an insider attack, and generally the readiness to have the data available to you to help you respond in an intelligent way. And then one of the other things that stuck out to me from the survey, specifically on it detecting insider threats, was that budgets are not aligned with reality. So 52% of the survey respondents said they perceived negligent employees as causes of significant damage. And it's important when talking about insider threats to split them into a couple of different, you can split them into a couple of different categories. But one of the main distinctions that we would make is that there's a threat posed by somebody who's negligent. So they're either making a mistake or perhaps being manipulated by an external force possibly. And then there's malicious insiders, and they are less common but frequently more damaging. So 52% of folks said negligent employees cause significant damage. Another 22%, the slide is not up on the stat is not up on the screen, said malicious employees were a significant cause. So you get to 74% of folks that perceived insiders as causes of significant damage. You marry that to the fact then that 44% of the people that responded are spending 10% or less on solutions that focus on insider threat, whether that's detection or remediation. So you can really see that the budgets have not aligned, and it's even more stark when you see that 40% of the people that responded don't have any idea if they spend anything or what they might be spending. So there's a pretty good chance that out of that 40%, a lot of them are spending less than 10%, because I don't think too many things bump up against the 10% of an IT budget without folks knowing about it. So I think that we have some work to do to try to make sure that we're focusing at least some of our resources, or an appropriate amount of our resources, on a significant source of security challenges. Now, I think one of the reasons that people don't take the time and focus on insider threats and detection is because there has been for a long time a perception, and it's something that's easier to deal with, that threats come from outside the firewall. They come from outside the moat. It's a difficult transition at times to say that there are people that we've brought in and that we trust and that we work with that maybe don't have our best interests at heart. But the fact is, there are people inside the moat very frequently who are trying to figure out how to either harm the organization or how to get information out, and those would be the malicious insiders, or they're enabling information, confidential information, to get out across that moat through negligence. And that's an area that we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about how user behavior analytics can help you with those things. So One last kind of quick set of statistics to sort of set the topic here, and it speaks to that sort of mindset that there are people that it's hard to deal with the fact that there might be people in the organization that don't always have its best interests at heart and might be actually doing things to harm the organization. So, part of a survey that we participated in, and you can see the information on it down in the lower right-hand corner there. One of the things that was asked was, have you ever experienced an insider attack? And what you can see up there is that by far the biggest number, 45%, were unable to answer the question. They said, we're just not sure, which is consistent with the fact that a lot of folks are don't have focused efforts on detecting insider threats in place to date. 24% came out and said, no, we've never experienced one. What I don't have is data from within that 24% of how many of them have focused insider threat detection programs versus not. I suspect that the majority of them don't, but it's simply a suspicion. And then that leaves you with 31% who said, yes, we've had insider attacks. Or of the universe of people that could give a yes or no answer, 56% of that universe of people said, yes, we've experienced an insider attack in the 12 months leading up to this survey. So in and of itself, a pretty significant number. The 3.8 number that is hopefully, if we're not dealing with any latency issues, appearing on your screen now, is the average number of insider attacks per organization from within that universe that acknowledged having them. So a very significant number of attacks. And it probably is not unfair to extrapolate that number out through the folks that are not sure. They may even have a higher number, but you can kind of take as a baseline and say 3.8 is a pretty solid number as an average. Now, we also asked folks to put a number on the cost of dealing with an insider attack. So this was a question that was aimed at the folks that acknowledged having them. And half the people that could put a number on it said it cost between $100,000 and just over $2 million. Or better said, between $100,000 and over $2 million. It was a very small percentage that said it was over $2 million. So for the most part, between $100,000 and $2 million. Very large number of people said they couldn't put a number on it, and then a smaller percentage said less than $100,000. And we didn't have any finer tuning or finer granularization on, was less than $100,000, $10 or $90,000. So significant costs associated with remediating an insider threat. So let's talk a little bit about different types of insiders that might exist within your organization, that exist within organizations, because these are archetypes, if you will. And once we get an understanding of who they are and some of the things that they try to accomplish, then that enables us to start looking at different behaviors and start to think, how can we detect anomalies in behaviors that might help us detect the presence of these types of insiders? So, to turn a phrase, to put our cards on the table, there's several different kinds of insider archetypes out there. We're going to start with one that is probably the most commonly known and discussed, and probably the most common one, which is the disgruntled employee. Unhappiness is a great precursor to an insider threat-like behavior, and this is going to trend towards the malicious insider. We'll talk later about one that fits more into that negligent or accidental insider category. But frequently, disgruntled employees are looking to hurt the organization. They might be looking to conduct some sort of sabotage. They might be looking to take data out of the organization. And a lot of that behavior will exhibit itself at exit time, something that we talk about as a high-risk exit period. Within the 30 days leading up to somebody's resignation is a time when a whole lot of corporate information walks out of IT control. And it's really a period that you want to be looking at if you suspect somebody is getting ready to leave your organization, or if somebody gives you their notice, you want to be able to go back quickly and take a look at their activity and make sure that they haven't taken anything with them that should remain in your control, so you can deal with it while you still can. So that's a little bit about a disgruntled employee. Another very common type of insider is someone with a high sense of entitlement. And these are folks that are going to be very comfortable taking corporate information with them. Frequently, this is going to be stuff that they had a hand in creating. So you see this sense of entitlement a lot in creators, in marketing folks that might create fantastic graphics, and they think, well, I can lever this again at my next position, and this is mine. I created it. You see it in coders that write, when they're writing source code, and again, they have a sense of ownership in that. You see it in sales quite a bit. I come from a sales background, and folks that invest a lot of their blood, sweat, and tears in building up a contact database on behalf of the company that's paying them tend to think of those as their contacts and their accounts, and they believe they're entitled to take them with them. So a sense of entitlement is a big driver in another archetype of insider. You also have a ringleader. This is somebody that may be driven by a sense of disgruntlement. They may be driven by a sense of entitlement. Frequently, they're just driven by the quest for financial gain. And they're, again, going to look to exfiltrate confidential information from your organization, but they don't act alone. They know that they don't have access to everything that they might want, so they enlist others within the organization, frequently through deception, to pull together a much more complete set of information for them to take with them. And a lot of time, these are folks that are looking to go out and work for a competitor or start their own business, and these are, again, typically motivated by financial gain. That brings us to the imposter, and this is a very interesting one, and this is where you can see some of that accidental insider. But the imposter will, again, most frequently be going after your data, is an external actor. This is somebody that gains access and can pose as an insider. So they're either going to do that through compromised credentials or possibly through manipulation of an insider to get past your firewall, to get inside the moat, if you will. And then finally, there's the mole. And this is somebody who is in your organization for the purposes of doing harm. This is not nearly as common as some of the other ones, but they do exist. They are, as the back of the trading card says, the quintessential double agent. They're working for you. They're probably getting financial benefit from you, but they're really working for the benefit of an outside entity. And this exists, and you'll see this somewhat frequently in very high areas of expertise, scientists and engineering. And a lot of times they're working on behalf of an entity in a country of origin, or they're working on behalf of an entity that they really want to be employed in. So those are the 5 main types of insider archetype that we encounter as we're out and as we're talking to our customers. And these are not made up out of whole cloth archetypes. In terms of a disgruntled employee, a great example is a guy named Ricky Joe Mitchell. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. He admitted that he reset all the network servers to factory settings intentionally when he heard that he was going to be fired. The company he worked for was unable to fully communicate or really conduct its business for about 30 days. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to recover historical data. So classic kind of disgruntled employee that went out and committed an act of sabotage. An example of somebody who felt entitled, which I said is very common against sales, across sales and creators of information. This one is so common that rather than citing a classic example, I'd point to some surveys, one by Semantic and one that we've done, that show that about 1 out of 2 employees think it's okay to take corporate data with them when they leave, and a full 40% of those that say it's okay to do that think it's okay to use it at their next position. So that speaks to that sense of entitlement. In terms of a ringleader, potential example here, and this is something that we blogged about a while back. One of the hot companies out there, Lyft, in that sharing economy space, has alleged publicly and in court documents that their COO took strategic product plans, financials, forecasts, and went with them across the proverbial street to Uber. Now, they didn't say in their filing how he got there, which service he used to get across town. But this one presents potentially as a classic case of an insider who felt entitled to information that he either had a hand in creating or signed off on, and that would be a use of him down the road. Again, these are allegations that have not borne themselves out yet, but it's all publicly available in court filings. The imposter, very common type of insider. There's been a lot of breaches that have been sourced from this of late. Anthem is one. That was back in January. It was very well publicized. The source of the breach appeared to be a compromised login credential. The attackers ran a database query using system admin credentials. Then they uploaded data to a cloud storage service. So something that if you're looking for it would probably not have been that hard to detect, because you probably don't have a lot of system admins that are uploading lots of data in an unusual pattern to cloud storage services. So if you were looking for that, you probably would have caught it. And so that's an example of an imposter. And then finally, the mole. A great example there is a company, the CME Group. They had a software engineer. I think his last name was Yang. He worked at the company for 11 years. This was going to be a trusted individual. And sometime late in year 10, early in year 11, working in concert with a couple of folks outside the organization, he planned to start up a rival company. He downloaded more than 10,000 files containing source code to his work computer. Then he transferred those files to USB and walked them out the door. Again, less common than some of the other insider types, have the potential to be very damaging, and a really great example as we talk about user behavior analytics of where you can see someone that deviates from a normal pattern. It would not have been normal for this person to be downloading, thousands of files and then transferring them to a USB. So, enough about the different type of insiders that might exist. The question that's probably more interesting to everybody on the phone today is, what risk do your own insiders pose? And if you think and if you think about the positions in your company, each position comes with some level of risk, and it's generally going to be governed by the amount of access the person sitting in that position requires to get their job done. The greater their access, the greater the risk that's presented. Think about me. I'm a very risky person within this organization. I have access to pretty much everything. If I woke up one day and decided to do the organization harm, access controls and perimeter defenses, which consume a lot of budgets, are pretty much rendered useless because of the nature of my position. So what can we do about this? And this is where we really start to talk about user behavior analytics. We need to have that focused effort on detecting insider threats. I cited Dr. Cole earlier from the SANS Institute. He's a SANS faculty fellow. He's a recognized security expert. I think he holds about 20 patents. He was the CTO of McAfee. He was chief scientist for Lockheed Martin. This is a pretty serious individual. He wrote that your organization currently has an insider threat of some sort is a near certainty. Therefore, you have to approach security with the assumption that an insider threat has already compromised you and focus your energy on detection. Preventing insider attacks is important. It's a key part of security. However, companies frequently fool themselves into believing that they can stop all attacks or that there's nothing that they can do to stop the attack. Because people will get wrapped around the axle of, if they have access, how do I stop them from using it? One of the things that Dr. Cole points out is that insiders are a continuous and constant problem for IT security, and that if we put this detection first methodology in our minds, it can really go a very great distance in helping secure the organization and the things that are most important to the organization. In our work with the SANS Institute, we asked folks in that survey, again with the 700 plus respondents, what they were most concerned about as it pertained to an insider threat. And as you can see up here on the screen, 4 of the top 5 answers were directly correlated to data exfiltration. Folks are most concerned with data leaks, with breaches, with theft, things that you can put under that umbrella term of data exfiltration. That helped inform us to focus on detecting data exfiltration potential. And as I talked about earlier, we direct that focus where the insider interacts with the data. One of the interesting things in the survey is that the one that's not circled, second from the left, was reputation damage. But if you actually cracked into the survey and read it, you'd see that it was reputation damage stemming from a data breach or data leak. So really the top 5 answers from folks were most concerned about our data being taken from us. So this is where user behavior analytics offers a lot of value. And we talked a little bit earlier about the 2 spaces that we play in, the user behavior analytics, or UBA, and then the user activity monitoring, or UAM. So let's talk a little bit about user behavior analytics in a little more detail and how we go about that, because I think that's the reason why you folks are here with us. As I said at the onset, user behavior analytics is about detecting insider threats, and it focuses on patterns of human behavior. So what we do is we collect a lot of information. a lot of information on how people are interacting with the IT resources they've been given, and also we can glean intelligence from the way people communicate. And then we take that data and we apply algorithms, data science, whatever term you want to apply on top of it, to detect for meaningful anomalies, again, for indications of potential threat. So as you start to think about putting in place a program to detect insider threats, what this slide is attempting to communicate is that you're going to have a pool of users in your organization that you would classify as lower risk. Maybe they have less access than other folks might within your organization. Now, you notice that I'm not using the term no risk because I don't think that position exists within a company. But for the folks that are classed as lower risk, user behavior analytics deployed broadly is a great tripwire or alert system to make sure that that risk isn't converting itself into threat undetected. And then you're going to have a pool of folks that are higher risk, and our recommendation would be to employ a combination of user behavior analytics and user activity monitoring. And again, the user activity monitoring is going to provide you with a much more detailed and contextual view into what someone's doing. So these two things, two technologies really interplay nicely with each other. For us, in fact, we've built them to run out of the same console to make it easy to switch from one mode to another or from one view of the world to another, so that if something were detected via user behavior analytics, you would be able to go in and take a deeper dive look and determine the best course of action for dealing with it. Our approach to user behavior analytics is housed within our Spector 360 Recon offering. And I'm going to click through a couple of screenshots of that now to give you kind of an understanding of what it is. For the folks on the phone that use Spector 360, this is resident within the product that you own. It's a license key option that we just need to enable. And that would enable you to use this. Obviously, we do charge for it, but from a testing perspective, we could simply enable it for you. So what we did, as I kind of hinted at earlier, is really focus on data exfiltration potential as a starting point. Because if you can detect it, then you can take steps to prevent it. One of the other things we did was we worked very hard to make user behavior analytics usable. No big professional services bills, not real steep learning curves, not a lot of difficulty or time spent tuning the solution to fit your needs. We really tried to put this into a place where it can be used very quickly out of the box and start returning value just as soon as those baselines are set. So as you can see up here on the screen, getting started is really as simple as selecting the users or groups that you want to analyze behavior for, and then highlighting the specific behaviors you're most interested in. We can detect anomalies in two different ways or against two different baselines today. The first, which is the one highlighted on the screen through the radio button being checked there, is you can compare a user to their historical self. So I could take Joe and say, I want to know what Joe's normal behaviors are, and then alert me if Joe deviates from normal. You can also compare a user, we'll keep picking on Joe here, against a group. So Joe might sit in marketing, so compare Joe to the historical behaviors of the marketing group as a whole, and let me know when Joe deviates from the group behavior patterns. And they work together very well to give you a very accurate picture. In our next release, which is due out about a month from now, I think that's still an accurate date, sometime in October, we're going to add a third methodology for detecting anomalies, and that will be against groups that are built by the solution based on observed behaviors. So the solution will look at the universe of users within your organization, and it will group them or class them together based on the applications they use and the resources they access, and will basically tell you, you have these groups within your company based on the behaviors they exhibit, and then you can choose to baseline against that and to detect deviations from that as well. Because a lot of times what you'll see is that people's behaviors will deviate from groups depending on how your IT infrastructure is set up, because sometimes when someone moves from marketing to sales or from technical support to pre-sales engineering, we don't always remember to go in and change all their accesses and permissions and things. So you start to see some behaviors that don't necessarily make sense in the formal group that they're in, and this will help call that out. And it really makes the anomaly detection a lot more sophisticated and accurate. Once you've selected the type of baseline you're running, again, you target who you want this to apply to. We allow targeting by groups right now. And then you can go in and expand if you want to see who's within a group. Obviously, at great scale, that presentation is less useful to you, but we have other ways of doing that. Once you've selected the user groups you're going to be baselining activity patterns for, or behavior patterns for, then it's a matter of deciding what behaviors you're most interested in. And again, we focused on data exfiltration. So you can see up here on the screen some of the different things that we can look at. So if we go back to that example earlier of the mole who touched a far greater number of files, 10,000 in the example I used, and pulled them down to their work machine, was simply working on a document count, we would have had a detection there. And then they moved those to portable storage. And at the very bottom of the screen, you'd see that files copied from local to removable storage would be another place that we could flag. If they didn't use removable storage, if they put them up into Dropbox or something, we could catch them by looking at behaviors on cloud storage. Sometimes you'll see data exfiltrated via print, a tried and true low-tech methodology of getting information out. So we tried to include all of the different ways a true insider might exfiltrate data, because true insiders, have more options available to them than, say, an imposter who really needs to get that data off to a remote server. But we've incorporated them as well with the cloud storage and with FTP uploads to make sure that we're really looking at the most common ways that data would be taken out of your control and out of your environment. We also look specifically within email, because it is the most common way these types of things happen. So we'll look for changes in the amount of email activity and the number of attachments being sent out, the size. If somebody's starting to move a large amount of data off, we'll be able to catch that in a size detection. But as I mentioned earlier, we can look at things that are not only technical indicators, but also psycholinguistic indicators. And we do that by looking into the language people use. So in the release that these screenshots are taken from, one of the things that we detect on, if you were to checkbox that language tab or that language option there, is a shift in pronoun usage. There have been linguistic studies that have shown that as people engage in insider threat behavior, they become more invested in their own success than in the success of the team. And that's reflected in their language through the use of more I words and less we words. So we detect for that. We also detect for some differences in language pattern matching, which can also show a deviation from the group as somebody starts to lead a little bit more of a double life within the organization. And we're going to be adding more features in that area, including in the next release, that will really help us begin to marry together both those technical indicators and the psycholinguistic indicators. And what that really gives you the ability to do is help you prioritize. So you may have multiple people in your organization that show a deviation. Perhaps a number of people are suddenly moving more information to cloud storage. We want to give you ways, easily usable ways to figure out who you need to look at first. So if you were to see perhaps some of these psycholinguistic indicators changing on one of those multiple people, that'd be a good chance for you to prioritize and say, I better take a look at that one first because they're showing some other indications. And the blending together of those two sets of indicators is very powerful. And we think that really gives us an advantage and gives folks that are using our solution an advantage in making sure that they have a really comprehensive insider threat detection program in place. Now, once you've set up these different baselines to detect against and alert on, you're going to be at a point where you're going to want to tune some of this to make it right for your organization. And as I mentioned earlier, we set out to make user behavior analytics usable, and this screen really hides a lot of complexity. So we wanted to make it very quick and very simple for folks, whether they were sitting in a SOC with a team of analysts, or they were the more IT generalist whose time is limited, to be able to get value out of this solution. So what you can see here, the little red dots on the screen represent the number of alerts you would receive. And out of the box, we would set alert thresholds here to medium. So it's going to trigger on significant variations from normal behaviors. But all you need to do is slide that bar, and you can tighten it, and that will trigger on smaller variations, or you can slide back and broaden it out and trigger only on extreme variations. And again, this would help you align things to your risk profile. So lower risk users you might be happy with normal or even a little bit of a looser threshold on that. You're looking for something significant to tell you that maybe this person's become higher risk. Higher risk users, you might want to screw those thresholds down a little bit to make sure that you're detecting on the smallest deviations and not letting anything slip through the cracks. And that's it. That is the entirety of the process it takes to get user behavior analytics up and running. Some of the other things that take place on the action screen, it basically allows you to set who's going to receive alerts. And then we also have the ability to pipe these alerts into a SIM system if you're using them. And that information is available in the documentation about how to configure that. But once you've gone through this, and it takes a little bit of time for baselines to be able to be set, about 20 days of activity gives us enough to be able to start sending meaningful alerts. That will set you up to be able to start receiving alerts that look like this. So they basically say, in this case, 3 of 55 users in the marketing group have deviated from normal. And here's an example of one. Michael normally prints about 10 and a half documents, and he just printed 2,400, which is certainly unusual. That could just as easily say he normally moves about 1 document a week up to Dropbox, and he just moved 2,400, which would probably be a lot more alarming. But that gives you an idea of the type of information that you can pull using user behavior analytics and how that can benefit you in making sure that there aren't activities going on within the organization that threaten the security of your information that you don't know about. So that is some discussion on how Spectre 360 Recon and more generally how user behavior analytics can help you detect insider threats. The flip side of that coin is to make sure that you have enough detailed information behind an alert to be able to act accordingly. And this is where, when I talked about on the higher risk users, having that blend of user behavior analytics and user activity monitoring, or Spectre 360 Recon and Spectre 360, again, running out of the same console, can really be beneficial. Because you might see information, you might see that alert on Michael and say, all right, I want to get an idea of exactly what's happening here. So you'd be able to, using Spectre 360, go in and very quickly see exactly what Michael did. And that's going to help you understand, do we have a true threat? Do we have something where maybe we just need to correct the behavior? Or do we, even down to a false positive, potentially? So the blending of the two solutions together really helps you understand what's going on inside the organization. And having that level of detail that Spectre 360 can provide helps you with response. We talked earlier about the lag from detection to response. And a good bit of that comes from the time it takes to assemble the information that's necessary to be able to satisfy the requirements that are frequently put by groups like legal and HR. And these are not inappropriate requirements when dealing with an employee. And they're going to want to make sure that things are a little bit more bulletproof typically. So having that information readily available and in a format that they can easily see and understand can really help you speed your response and inform your response. And then it can also further help you with a post-mortem type situation where you're trying to go back and recreate what happened so that you can tighten up security protocols or processes so that in the future you don't have to deal with this type of threat again. So that is a little bit about how user behavior analytics can benefit your organization and how the two solutions that we offer, Spectre 360 Recon, the user behavior analytics offering, and Spectre 360, our user activity monitoring, complement each other. Just leave you with some closing thoughts. There's pretty easily found on the internet estimates that about 70% of the value of an average business is held within its information systems. So I think the vast majority of the folks on the phone are probably charged with maintaining those information systems. You are the guys that are keeping the company running. And that's the information that insiders and outsiders are trying to get at and exfiltrate from your company. Very small percentage of dollars are spent safeguarding proprietary information specifically. So where a lot of that 70% of the value is held. And the vast majority of those dollars that are spent in an effort to keep outsiders out on perimeter defenses and on access controls. Very little is being done to protect proprietary information from the untrained or accidental or malicious, disgruntled employee or contractor or insider, if you will. And a lot of that information is taken, as you can see up there on your screen, from Dan Smartwood's testimony in front of Congress some years ago. But they hold true today. So this is a serious problem that it's very possible to put real numbers on. So what do we do next? If I could offer some advice that is not all about buying my product, take a look at your history of security problems. If you have a system that you keep that in, take a look backwards and see what percentage of your security issues were caused by outside actors versus insiders. Most people, when they do this exercise, find that the majority of their problems came related to insiders, to users, right? And that's why there's such a long list of help desk jokes about all the problems that users create within organizations. Take that information and then look at your budget. And what percentage are you spending on making sure that you're secure against threats from the inside? I am not recommending that people stop spending on perimeter security or on access controls and those types of things and shift all that money to insider security. I think that would be reckless. But I do think we need to say, are we allocating at least a solid amount to be able to detect insider problems so we can deal with them? Because the dollars spent on perimeter defense really don't do anything to help you protect against a true insider. Take a look at your incident response plan if you have one. If you don't have one, get one. But make sure it has special provisions for dealing with an insider incident. You're going to have an extended team involved most typically. It might involve legal and HR, as I alluded to earlier. You want to make sure that you've planned for these things in advance. We have a webinar, the link's up there on the screen, where we had an expert in incident response on with us, and we talked about a lot of these topics. It's available from our website. You can go to SpectorSoft and then under company down to events, and you'll find it. There's some good information in there as well. And then I would encourage everybody to focus on detecting insider threats. And I'll leave you with this as a closing thought. This is a quote directly taken from the Market Guide for Employee Monitoring Products and Services from Gartner Research. It was published earlier this year. Andrew Walls is the author, and he wrote that by 2018, organizations that monitor and analyze a broad spectrum of employee activities will experience 50% fewer insider data breaches than organizations that monitor internal communications only. So I think there's real benefits to be realized here, because even if Andrew's off by a fairly significant amount, it's a very substantial reduction in the insider breaches, and it doesn't take much perusing of the news to see how common they have become, or at least how publicized they have now become. That quote is contained inside that market guide. The market guide is housed within a document that we recently made available. It's called Increasing Security and Productivity Through Insider Intelligence. You can get it by going to that bit.ly. You can also find it on our website. If you go to SpectorSoft.com, in the rotator, you'll see a link that will take you out to go grab that document. It's a great read, and it has all of the Gartner information included within it on this space. I would also encourage folks, if you haven't already done so, to go out and take a look at Spectre 360 Recon. And get it installed in a test environment in your organization and put it through its paces, because there's a lot of benefit from this user behavior analytics to help you really tighten up security within the organization. That's all of the information I wanted to share with you folks today. I really do appreciate you spending some time with us. Our folks on the phone, if you have any questions, certainly reach out to your account representative and they'll be happy to help you. And if there's any that I might be able to help answer, I'm sure they'll find me. And I wish you all a great rest of your day. And that's all we had for today. So thanks everyone for joining us. Take care. Bye-bye.